One of the guys who saw this pandemic for what it was early on was on our program, among other programs, trying to ring the bell, is Senator Tom Cotton, and he is joining us now. Senator, how are you, sir?
Hey, Glenn, it's good to be on with you again. Thank you for having me.
You bet. So you're getting credit from a lot of places as being the guy who saw this coming, but is it because genius or because you take China for what we know China is, not for what we hope China is?
Well, Glenn, it's certainly far from any claim that I'm a genius, but it does have a lot to do with a clear-eyed view of the Chinese Communist Party going back many years leading up to this pandemic outbreak. Specifically in January, as I began to see information in public news sources, not in classified intelligence briefings that I received, just in public news sources, sometimes obscure or foreign sources like East Asian news outlets or medical journals, I saw a clear contrast between two things. On the one hand, you had the rhetoric of the Chinese Communist Party, which was designed to minimize the threat, soothe over fears, tell everyone everything was okay, don't worry, we've got it under control, this can't be transmitted from humans to humans. Contrast that with the Chinese Communist Party's actions, which were extreme and draconian, shutting down a city that is larger than New York City, literally boarding up doors or welding doors shut on high-rise apartment buildings, allowing the Hong Kong local government to shut down all air travel from the Chinese mainland, shutting down schools, not just in Wuhan, but across the country, all 1.3 billion people worth. When the contrast between that rhetoric and those actions told me that the Chinese Communist Party understood just how grave this virus could become, and is therefore the reason why I started sounding the alarm in mid-January and urging the president to shut down travel with China, which thankfully he did by the end of January.
So Senator, I've been concerned about this coronavirus because, for the same reasons, watching what China was doing, thinking this is nuts. They don't ever do stuff like this. But I think we're going to be proven to be accurate on this. I was less concerned about the death toll that it would take on the rest of the world than I was the toll on the free market system. We are facing a possible depression, and we've got people in Congress that are, I think, cheering for this. They are looking to hurt the economy in any way to change the capitalist system into a socialized system. I think we are at a place where our Constitution and our way of life is on the ropes, mainly because of the people in Congress.
Well, Glenn, I would put the responsibility for what we're going through first and foremost at the feet of the Chinese Communist Party. They had a chance to keep this virus a local health problem in Wuhan. Instead, they allowed it to become a global pandemic. And to give you a sense of the extent of Chinese treachery, on January 23rd, the Chinese Communist Party shut down all travel by airplane out of Wuhan inside of China. So you couldn't fly from Wuhan to Shanghai or to Beijing or anywhere else inside China, but they allowed international air travel from Wuhan to continue. So you could continue to fly from Wuhan to other places in the world, to include New York and San Francisco. That gives you a sense of their treachery in this matter. Now, your more fundamental point, though, is very important, and I share your concern about what this virus has done to jobs and our economy, not just here in the United States, but in all of our allied countries as well as Europe, in Japan, in Singapore, in Taiwan, in South Korea, what has happened across the civilized democratic world. And that's why it is so important that we give our people the confidence that the virus is under control, that they're less likely to get it, and that if they do get it, the healthcare system will be functioning for them. Because that is ultimately what has caused the economy across the Western world to come grinding to a halt. Donald Trump didn't shut down the economy. The president doesn't have that authority in our system. Even our governors and mayors, who in many cases have been aggressively saying what kinds of activities will be permitted, are more or less just reflecting reality. If you look at where the state of the economy was in Europe and the United States in the first half of March, before many governments were taking this action, you'll see that our people were voluntarily and spontaneously starting to stay home. If you look at, like, say, open table bookings for restaurants or airline travel or so forth. So it's not so much a government dictate that has caused the economy to grind to a halt. It is our people's understandable fears of the virus. That's why it's so important.
But I think, the Senator, I think that there are governors that are taking, I mean, the governor of Michigan just banned advertising for products that aren't essential. What is that? I mean, I think there are those who are taking their powers, so to speak, way too far.
Yeah, so there's no doubt, for instance, that some governors, I think, have made mistakes. Don't get me wrong. I have not heard about the ban on advertising for any so-called non-essential activity, but, someone might say a Lego set is not essential. Well, if you got a 4-year-old kid at home or 3-year-old kids, I can tell you it's pretty essential to have Legos for them.
Mm-hmm.
Likewise, in Virginia, the governor extended the stay-at-home order until, I think, mid-June. Maybe that'll end up being necessary, Glenn, but we don't know that now. We don't know it in Virginia. We don't know it in Arkansas. We don't know. That's why President Trump has only suggested it continue until the end of April. We can take stock in another 10 or 15 days about where we stand. So there's no doubt that some governors and mayors have made bad decisions. But in the end, what is more important than what any governor or mayor does is that we have the techniques and the practices in place that we can stop the population-wide measures we have now and return to traditional public health control, which is case-based measures. So rather than saying everyone needs to stay at home, we can just identify those people who are sick and those people who've been around them and tell them you individually need to stay at home. And the president outlines that at his press conferences and what we're doing in terms of getting testing up on a rapid basis, getting antibody testing, producing masks, not just for doctors and nurses, but for people at the workplace, and so on and so forth. That's how we give people confidence to get back to something like normal life.
And do you have confidence that we are taking the steps right now? I know we ordered 500 million masks for the stockpile. We're ordering all kinds of medicine, et cetera, et cetera. Hopefully these tests come online. But are you comfortable that if this thing comes back with a vengeance in the fall, we're not going to have to go in shutdown again? We'll have the tools to make sure that our medical system won't collapse on us.
Well, first off, Glenn, because there's so much unknown about the virus still, I don't want to say I have total confidence in that. There are no guarantees right now.
But we're taking this. We're taking the steps that we know. You feel we're taking those steps that we should be taking?
At this point, after a false start or two related to testing at the CDC and FDA in early February, we are rapidly scaling up our testing capacity as quickly as we can. The world's very best medical researchers and scientists are looking into every angle for possible prophylactic drugs, therapeutic drugs, and vaccines. We are producing the kind of, again, personal protective equipment, not just for doctors and nurses, which we, of course, must have, but for people to get back to work. So if they're working on the factory line, they can have the masks that they need. Because ultimately, it's those steps that will allow us to get back to something like normal so we can get out of the situation we're in now, which is buying time through population-based measures to produce all those things.
So, Senator, we're talking to Senator Tom Cotton, the guy who was leading the charge on the coronavirus. Let me take you back to China for a second. What they've done, you could argue, is an act of war. I mean, they've killed more people than died in World War I by far. They have disrupted our economy. Anybody who would do this as a terrorist strike, it would be war. I don't want war, and I'm not suggesting war, but our relationship with China cannot go back to the way it was, where we just say and we ship all of our business over to them. Agree or disagree?
That's exactly right, Glenn. I can already tell you that public opinion in this country ran very strongly against China, no matter what business or financial or media elites believe. That's because a lot of Americans to be hostile towards China. If you work in a factory and your job has been outsourced to China, if your industry, like rice farmers in Arkansas, have seen their proprietary intellectual property stolen or their computer systems hacked, if you're appalled by the way China forces women to have abortions or harvest organs from political prisoners or smashes Christian churches or interns, religious minorities in mass gulags. And now to top it off, they've unleashed a pandemic on the entire world. So things are going to change, and they're going to change rapidly, not just in the United States, but all around the civilized world, because I can tell you, public opinion in America, and not just America, views China as a pariah state.